Tonight, we're diving into the myth of Irene, the forgotten son of Hephaestus, a god not born on Olympus, but forged from fire and steel deep in a mortal blacksmith's forge. His mission: steal the eternal flame from the peak of Olympus, to rekindle humanity's dying fire. But it's not just any mission. He's up against a three-headed underworld guard, a jealous god in winged sandals, and a storm-summoning prophet who only sees one ending: Arian's death. So before you get too comfy, take a sec to like and subscribe, only if you're into Myth Meets Mystery stuff. And hey, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, what time is it? For you, sometimes our stories beat sleep itself, and sometimes they just make your dreams a little wilder. Time to turn off the lights, fire up the fan for some white noise, and let's rewind tonight's tale in Maiini's flickering forge, where men shape iron with sweat and prayers. There was a woman with hands as godlike as any deity's. Her name was Callista, a mortal blacksmith with fire in her soul and a hammer that sang when it struck copper. She forged swords sharp enough to cut spears midair, and armor so seamless, people whispered, that even Ares himself wore her breastplate into battle. The gods took notice, but only one god came down to see her: Hephaestus, the lame blacksmith god, the outcast of Olympus. Watched quietly. He wasn't drawn by beauty. Callista wasn't one for perfume or palace gowns. She wore war-black clothes, smelling of iron smoke and pine. But when she worked, Hephaestus saw something divine in her movements, something familiar. One night, under a low, blood-red Aegean moon, Hephaestus entered his smoke-filled, shadowy workshop. No gifts, no divine edicts, just his presence. That night, the forge burned brighter, and 9 months later, a child was born. That child was Arian. He didn't cry, not at first. His eyes opened glowing like embers, the forge's fire flaring as if recognizing kin. The midwives gasped. One whispered, touched by the divine. Another crossed herself, while the eldest murmured, he won't stay here long. Arian grew faster than other boys. By 5, he could mold iron. By 7, he'd forged his first sword, perfect, sharp, and strangely warm to the touch. He never played, he never lied. There was a silence about him that made others uneasy. The villagers feared what they couldn't understand. They called him cursed, the son of a god without a throne. Children avoided him. Priests refused to bless him. But Callista loved him fiercely, teaching him not just how to work fire, but how to respect it. She said fire obeys those who listen, not those who command. When Arian turned 16, his forge never cooled, cranking out weapons for cities he'd never seen and kings he'd never met. But even as metals flowed under his hands, something deeper stirred inside him. He wasn't born to serve. He was born to change the world. For ages, the eternal flame was a gift stolen from the heavens. Defied by Prometheus to endure, fire wasn't just for warmth, it was for thought, art, and creation, the thing that separated humans from beasts. But that rebellious era was fading. Humanity forgot what they owed the gods, and the gods turned their backs on humanity. It started slow. Hearths that once blazed grew dim, forests chilled, storms lasted longer, crops wilted in spring, houses filled with frost breath, even in midsummer. Kids shivered by smokeless chimneys. Old women muttered prayers over cold ashes. Priests spoke of humanity. Things started slow. The roaring fireplaces began to die out. The forests got colder. Storms lasted longer, crops withered in spring, and houses filled with frost breath. Even in the middle of summer, kids shivered next to smokeless chimneys. Old ladies muttered prayers to ashes that gave off no heat. Priests talked about punishment. Scholars blamed the stars, but across villages, towns, and empires, a different fear took hold. Not that the world was ending, but that the gods had abandoned them, and they were right. Up on Mount Olympus, the gods had sealed away the last real fire, a spark kept only in the sacred hearth, untouched by mortal hands for centuries. No god dared share it again. They feared human rebellion, feared what Prometheus had started. They said, let them suffer. They need to remember their place. But not all gods agreed. In the shadowy corners of the world, whispers in the cold chamber of Delphi, the prophet dreamed of fire, walking on two legs, lighting the city with his steps. And deep inside forgotten temples, flickering candles suddenly flared back to life at the sound of a blacksmith's hammer striking an anvil. Arion knew nothing of this. He just knew iron was getting tougher to shape, that the fire in his forge needed more breath, that the warmth he once took for granted was slowly slipping away. But the world had started watching. Gods, old and young, fell silent, their eyes fixed on Mycenae, the divine hearth on Olympus's peak, shielded by marble and fate itself. Flickered for the first time in ages, not in response to a god, but to a boy born of fire and sorrow, and deep within him, something began to glow. Delphi was dying, once the heart of the divine council, where kings and warriors climbed stone paths seeking Apollo's voice, now silent, columns cracked and overgrown, sacred streams reduced to mist, yet a voice still echoed, buried deep in the mountain's breath. The prophet Arion arrived quietly. No one greeted him at the gate. The torches lining the temple had long since died out. Ivy clung to crumbled altars like stubborn fingers, unwilling to let go of lost faith. Thunder rumbled in the clouds above. Not rain, but the growl of something ancient watching. He descended to the empty chamber where generations before had wept and begged. There, atop a broken stone throne, sat the prophet. She wore a purple cloak, skin pale as ash, blind eyes blazing in the storm. Before he could speak, she took a deep breath like a flame, sucked back into a lantern. Haion, she hissed. Though no name was spoken, he said nothing. You will climb the mountain, you will take the fire, and you will die. Her voice snapped like a whip through the silence. He didn't flinch. He'd heard of prophets before, their riddles wrapped in poetry and metaphor. But this wasn't prophecy. It was a sentence. She slowly stood, limbs flowing like smoke caught in the wind. The gods will fight you. The world will demand your failure. The fire you seek doesn't belong to mankind. It was stolen once, and the price is eternal chains. Arion stepped forward, fists clenched. Then let me pay that price. Silence stretched, then laughter. Not cruel, but weary. The sound of someone who's seen too many stories end the same way. She whispered, "You are already who you are." The room darkened. Thunder outside grew louder. The air trembled with something ancient, primal. Then suddenly, everything fell silent. The prophet leaned back in her chair, her mouth opened, but only smoke escaped. Her prophecy had come true, and though Irian left without a word, her image followed him, in dreams, in flames, in every shadow cast by his forge. The gods had spoken, his path was set, but even Olympus couldn't predict what a dying world would do when handed fire. Before climbing Olympus's peak, one must earn the mountain's respect, and Olympus never bowed to the unproven. Legend says the mountain's base isn't stone or snow, but soul. Beneath its foundation lies a gate sealed by silence and guarded by the oldest fear in creation, Cerberus, Hades' hunting hound. No one passes that gate of fire. In every shadow cast by his forge's glow, the gods had spoken, his path was set, but even Olympus couldn't guess what a dying world would do when handed fire again. Before climbing Olympus's peak, one had to earn the mountain's approval, and Olympus never bowed to the unproven. Legend says the mountain's base isn't rock or snow, but soul. Beneath its foundation lies a gate sealed by silence and guarded by the oldest fear in creation, Cerberus, Hades' hellhound. No one passes that gate without touching death first. Irian didn't question this. He studied mythology like a blacksmith studies heat thoroughly and exhaustively. He knew what awaited below Olympus's foot, but to claim eternal fire, he'd have to go down, not metaphorically, but straight to hell. So he prepared not with armor, but with skill. He spent 3 days and nights forging a necklace, not for fighting, but for taming, made from obsidian stone, iron, and the last glowing ember from his mother's forge. He engraved 3 names on it, each representing a head of Cerberus. While working, he whispered, memory, loyalty, sorrow. On the 4th day, he stood before the dark cave, said to lay down forever. The wind was cold, but didn't burn his skin. It scratched his soul instead, and the air didn't smell like decay, but like forgotten prayers. He stepped deeper, deeper still, passing faintly glowing bones in the dark, past torches that lit themselves without flame, until he heard a sound, slow, heavy breaths, layered like 3 storms dreaming together. Cerberus. He entered an open space and saw the beast sleeping on a bed of ash and bones, each head twitching to its own rhythm. Its fur was blacker than when it wasn't there. Its eyes were shut, but the ears twitched. Irian didn't draw his weapon. He stepped closer, knelt, and held out the necklace. Then he started humming softly. It was the song his mother sang to him as a kid, the nighttime lullaby that made the world feel too big and too cruel. The middle head stirred. The left one opened an amber eye. The right one growled and then stopped. They listened, and in that silence, Irian fastened the necklace. Cerberus exhaled. The door behind him swung open not in anger, but respect. Irian had touched death, and death had stepped aside. The path to Olympus's peak wasn't a path at all. No signs, no guiding stars, just jagged rocks, a freezing wind, and whispers echoing from the void. Irian climbed not with confidence but instinct. His mortal hands bled. The sacred blood of the Lord blazed. The mountain blocked him at every turn. Then he appeared not roaring, not flashing power, but silent. Hermes, the trickster, Messenger with thief? He stood on a rock ahead, dressed like a traveler, baggy cloak, feather-tied sandals, eyes sharp as shattered glass. A crooked smile spread across his lips. "All right then," he said, flipping a coin between his fingers. "I thought you'd be taller." Arian kept climbing. "I know why you're here," Hermes continued, strolling casually beside him without lifting his feet. "You want to bring fire back to humanity. Sweet, noble, foolish." Arian stopped. "Then try and stop me." Hermes chuckled. "Stop you? Oh no, no. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make sure you understand the deal. You're stepping into Olympus's heart, the god's vault. A story that's not yours?" But Arian answered, "I am." That smile faded. "You're trying to restore a balance broken for some reason," Hermes said. "The flame was once a gift, a mistake, and now the gods guard it, like dragon's gold, not because it's precious, but because it's dangerous." Arian stared him down. Then they forgot what danger looked like. For the first time, Hermes's face turned uneasy. The air around them shifted. The coin vanished from his hand. His wings twitched. "You think you're Prometheus," he said coldly, "but next to him, you're nothing." "I'm not trying to be him," Arian replied. "I'm trying to finish what he started." Hermes stepped forward, pressed 2 fingers to Arian's chest. Pain surged. Not physical. It went deeper. A thread inside him twisted, turned. "The fire you seek," Hermes whispered, "will burn everything you have." Then he vanished. The mountain groaned. Thunder cracked. A storm had begun, not because of rain, but consequences. And Arian climbed higher, cursed but unshaken. The curse seeped into Arian's chest like frost in his lungs. At first, it was mild, tightening as he breathed, a slow burn under his skin, not because of rain, but because of consequences. And Arian climbed higher, cursed but unshaken. The curse seeped into Arian's chest like frost in his lungs. At first, it was light, tightening when he breathed, a faint, warm breath under his skin. But the higher he climbed, the deeper it bit, not like a wound, but like erosion. Piece by piece, the man's body was scraped away, leaving something rough behind. Olympus was no longer just a mountain. It was alive. The cliffs shook beneath him. Winds howled down the ravines like ancient voices, angry at being disturbed. The higher he went, the less mortal the world became. Trees stopped growing. Birds stopped singing. Even the stars above seemed to be retreating. No paths, just jagged rocks and sheer cliffs demanding a sacrifice with every step. Arian bleeds. He slips. Once, he nearly fell to his death, but a sudden heat from his chest kept him standing, like the fire Hermes warned about. The flame that would burn him has begun to awaken. Still, he climbs on, because every time he hesitates, he thinks of dying hearths, lonely villages, kids shivering in the dark. He thinks of his mother, blistered hands still trying to warm a world that forgot what warmth even means. But Olympus shows no mercy. Thunderclouds roll overhead. Lightning dances along the slopes like disappointed gods pacing back and forth. Now he can feel their eyes on him watching, judging, waiting for him to fall. But it's not just the mountain fighting him. This is Olympus itself. He passes ancient ruins carved in stone, temples long abandoned by faith, altars cracked, gods forgotten, Athena's statue with hollowed out eyes, Zeus's pillars shattered by time and silence. Irion realizes what no one dares admit: the gods aren't powerful anymore. They're scared. Scared that some mortal might steal fire without their permission. Someone not born in their palace might carry the light that once defined Olympus. And in that fear, they throw their worst at him: ice, lightning, illusions, voices. But he keeps climbing. With torn hands and a burning heart, he soars above the clouds, and out there, lit not by the sun, but by a divine flame, he sees it, the hearth, burning, waiting. Things aren't what he expected. Olympus isn't carved from marble or guarded by gods in gold armor. No trumpets, no gates, no thunderous sacred welcomes, just silence and fire. It stands in a windless clearing, ancient sun, a black stone altar. The hearth looks ancient, older than language made by hands long forgotten, and inside it, the eternal flame dances, not red, not orange, but white, pure, blinding, alive. It doesn't flicker. It watches. Arion steps closer. The heat doesn't burn him. It seeps in like it recognizes something lost ages ago. He holds his breath, skin tingling. The ember fire Hermes cursed in his heart now beats like a second heartbeat, calling the flame like a lost brother. He reaches out. Time freezes. He sees cities built from fire. He sees his mother's forge blazing in a bitter winter. He's witnessed civilizations rise and fall, all built around fire, and all forgetting why it burns. He also sees the punishment: Prometheus chained to a rock, his liver eaten daily by vultures. The gods call it justice, but Arion sees it for what it really is: fear of the crown. He could turn back. He could let humanity freeze, forget fire, forget him. But then he hears the wind whisper her name, Callista, and remembers who he is. He grabs the flame, and it takes him. Pain screams through his body, not like burning, more like rewriting. Bones crack and mend. His skin glows. Veins pulse wildly. He falls to his knees. Silent screams as the fire floods every inch of him, burning away the boy, forging the firebringer. He doesn't hold the flame anymore. He is the flame. The hearth's flame flickers, then fades, then cools, because the eternal flame no longer stays bound to Olympus. It has chosen a new vessel. Irion collapses beside the empty stone altar. Smoke rises from decline. Every civilization built around fire, and every civilization forgetting why it burned. He also saw the punishment: Prometheus chained to a rock, his liver eaten daily by vultures. The gods called it justice, but Arion saw it for what it was: fear wearing a crown. He could turn back, let humanity adapt to the cold, forget fire, forget him. But then he heard the wind whisper her name, Callista, and remembered who he was. He grabbed the fire, and it took hold of him. Pain screamed through his body, not like burning, but like being rewritten. Bones cracked and healed. His skin glowed. Veins pulsed wildly. He dropped to his knees, screaming silently as the fire flooded every corner of his body, burning away the boy, forging the fire bearer. He no longer held it. He was it. The hearth fire flickered, then dimmed, then cooled. The eternal flame was no longer bound to Olympus, so it chose a new vessel. Irion collapsed beside an empty stone pedestal. Smoke rose from his fingertips, but his eyes lit up like dawn. He breathed hard, but each breath spread a warm glow, riding the wind down the mountain toward the world below. He bore the fire, but not for himself, for everyone. Arion didn't climb down Olympus. He carried it with him. As soon as the fire entered him, the mountain stopped resisting. The wind stilled. The sky cleared. Even the rock beneath him seemed to shift, guiding him not out of respect, but recognition. He wasn't some trespasser anymore. He was a torch. His body burned with divine heat, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that stirs up life. Wherever his feet touched, frost melted away with every breath. The cursed wind softened. The air smelled not of smoke, but of renewal, rebirth. But he wasn't whole anymore. His limbs trembled under the weight of what he carried. The eternal flame wasn't just fire, it was memory. He could feel every spark it had ever flared up. The first campfire in a prehistoric cave, the torch lighting Athens, the forge that built Troy, and he felt the price paid for all of it. He'd seen cities burned for the glory of some god, temples razed, wars waged fueled by fire and stolen ambition. The god's gift was never innocent, but this time he wouldn't use it as a weapon. He flew down through clouds and silence, past shattered god statues once worshipped, now crumbling in sacred decay. He passed the cave where Cerberus once guarded the gate, but the beast was gone. Like death stepped aside for what the Aryan had become. He touched the underworld, and there, in a frozen village where the hearth had long turned to ashes, people gathered around him not out of fear, but awe. He said nothing, just lifted his hand, a flame dancing from his fingertips onto the nearest hearth. It roared, then roared again, then roared some more. A wave of warmth spread from house to house, city to city, across lands that had long forgotten what it felt like to huddle by fire without praying first. Irion burned. His hair shimmered like molten gold. His skin cracked like cooled obsidian. He was dying, but didn't weaken. He was becoming something else. He didn't steal the fire. He became it, and wherever it burned, the world whispered his name, not in worship, but in gratitude. No tomb was built for Irion, no statue carved, no songs sung in temples, no parades, no funerals, no epic last battle to mark his departure. But he never truly vanished. After the blaze flared back up, strange things started happening across the land. In remote villages, untouched by travelers, fires lit themselves. Entire frozen forests bloomed overnight. Blacksmiths swore their forges heated faster. Kids shivering in the cold told their parents they saw a man of light standing by the fire before it erupted. No one could prove a thing, but they all told the same story. He walked until there was nowhere left to walk. His body cracked and burned long ago, not from weakness, but transformation. What remained of Irion bones, blood, voice had turned to sparks, smoke, heat, and he let it all go. His mother's forge was the last place touched, old and abandoned, its fire cold for decades. Until one night a traveler passing by swore he saw a boy hammering something glowing white on the anvil. When he looked again, the forge was empty, but the fire still burned bright and hot, just like before. They say the gods felt it. Olympus trembled, sensing its power stripped away, trembling in silence, but the gods didn't fight back. Gratitude. No tomb was built for Irian, no statue carved, no song sung in a temple, no grand procession, no funeral, no epic final battle to mark his exit, yet. He never really vanished. After the fire flared back up, weird stuff started popping off all over the place. In remote villages untouched by tourists, fires just lit themselves up. Entire frozen forests suddenly bloomed overnight. Blacksmiths swore their forges heated up faster. Kids shivering in the cold told their parents they saw a glowing man standing by the flame just before it burst into life. Nobody could prove a thing, but everyone told the exact same story. He walked on until there was nowhere left to step. His body had cracked and burned long ago, not from weakness, but transformation. What was left of Aryan bones, blood, voice had turned into sparks, smoke, heat, and he gave it all up. His mother's forge was the last place touched old, abandoned, cold for decades, until one night a traveler passing by claimed he saw a boy hammering something glowing white onto the anvil. When the traveler looked back, the forge was empty, but the fire still blazed bright and hot, just like old times. They say even the gods felt it. Mount Olympus trembled silently, sensing its power slipping away, but the gods didn't fight back. No rage, no tantrums, because even they got it. Arian wasn't challenging them with war or pride. He reminded them of their purpose and the eternal flame, once hoarded by gods and heroes, now flickers in every village, every city, every lonely mountain hut. It lives in the warmth of soup shared among strangers, in candles lit by grieving hands, in torches raised by rebels chasing light in the darkest places, and always they whisper the same name, Orion. Some say if your fire dies out for no reason, that's him passing through. Others say if you listen closely to the crackle of the flames, you'll hear the rhythm of hammer-striking anvil, steady, patient, eternal, because Arian never dies. He becomes the warmth itself, not a god, not a hero, just a kid who gave up everything to remind the world how to shine again. Over in Sparta, where boys learn to fight before they can talk, and honor runs deeper than blood, the women weren't exactly pushovers either. Among them was a lady whose name echoed through marble halls like clashing steel, Leonthe, daughter of Commander Adrastos. She was born during a blood-red eclipse, when omens screamed through the city, midwives whispered. She came straight from Arian himself. By 12, she'd beaten her brother in wrestling. By 16, she was leading a hunting party into the Tethys Mountains, dragging back 3 wild boars tied behind her chariot. Leonthe wasn't just respected, people feared her. She walked through the Spartan square with a straight back and soft steps. The men looked down. The women eyed her with a mix of envy and awe. She rarely spoke unless asked, and her words were like arrows never wasted. But there was something about her that few noticed. When she shed her armor at night, when the torchlight dimmed and the outside world faded, Leonthe would stare up at the stars, not with a warrior's challenge, but with wonder. There was a softness deep inside her, a softness battle couldn't burn away. Longing not for marriage, not for conquest, but for something else, something Spartan law had no word for, peace, magic, mystery. She never talked about it. What she knew was this: every full moon, when the city slowed and the warriors were asleep, her body pulled her toward the cliffs above the Eurytus River. She'd leave behind her spear, her cuirass, her reputation, and become a lone woman wandering under the stars. She thought, this world, say, has to be bigger than Sparta, bigger than swords and pride. She felt it in her blood, like music she couldn't hear but knew was playing somewhere. And then one night, under a silver sky sharpened like a sword's edge, she saw it glide across a still forest lake, a swan, motionless, staring at her, moonlight rippling on its back. Beautiful in a way no swan had ever been before, and from that moment, Leonthi's life started drifting from blood and battle towards something softer, stranger, and way more dangerous: the hidden forest, untouched by the usual Spartan boots, nestled between cliffs. It whispered of something older than Sparta, older even than Olympus. Trees bent like crescents, low branches sparkling in moonlight. A shallow lake lay in the middle, calm as a mirror, and on it a swan. Its feathers shimmered like woven stars, neither white nor gray, but something in between. It floated in the silence of smoke, gliding over water without a ripple. Its long neck curved gracefully, as if sculpted by divine hands, and its eyes, divine eyes, held no animal wildness, no fear, only awareness. Leonthi stood frozen at the tree's base. Her training demanded caution. Nothing in nature moves like this. No creature dares face a human so boldly. But the swan didn't flee. It looked at her calmly, expectantly. She stepped closer. It tilted its head. One more step. Closer still, or the lake's surface didn't stir. She stood at the water's edge, heart steady but alert, hand resting lightly on the dagger strapped to her thigh. The swan moved slowly, cautiously toward her. When it reached the shallow shore, it stopped and bowed its head gently. Leonthas knelt down. She had seen 1,000 things in her life: burning camps, warriors screaming bloody war cries to the sky, newborn calves easing the dagger at his thigh. The swan moved slowly, cautiously toward her. When it reached the shallow water's edge, it stopped and bowed its head gently. Leonthi knelt down. She had witnessed thousands of things in her life: burning barracks, bloodied warriors screaming at the sky, newborn calves gasping their first breaths. But she had never seen anything so quiet and still, mesmerizing. She reached out. The swan didn't resist. Her fingertips touched its feathers, warm, strangely warm, like its body was powered by sunlight instead of blood. A surge swelled in her chest, not fear, not excitement, but something older, something she didn't know she'd missed until that very moment. Connection. The swan blinked once, then turned away, gliding back across the lake. Leonthi stayed kneeling, watching, clueless about what just happened, but sure it wasn't an accident. The next full moon night, she came back, and so did the swan, and the month after, and the month after that. No words, no promises, just presence, a ritual born from silence and gravity. When autumn came to the hills, Leonthi stopped wondering. Why? She just knew the swan would wait, and her world would never be the same again. Seasons changed, leaves grew, fell, and grew back again. The war raged deep under the hills, but in that moonlit forest, time seemed to freeze. Now, only the full moon mattered, only those nights. Leonthe used to measure her worth by battle scars, victories, and orders followed without question. But now, something softer was guiding her, something older than Spartan law. Every month, she returned to the forest, bearing gifts, fresh figs, soft linen, jewelry carved from olive wood. The swan never ate, never accepted gifts, but Leonthe kept coming, drawn by an instinct she couldn't explain. The swan always waited. It met her at the water's edge, gently dipping its head, then gliding beside her. Sometimes it flew circles around her. Sometimes it just stood by her on the shore, its warmth spreading through the air like a hidden sun. She started talking, not like a soldier, but like a woman no one had ever heard before. She told of her father's coldness, how victory never filled the emptiness in her chest, of nights staring up at the sky, wondering if there was more than swords and dirt. The swan said nothing but listened. She could feel it. Its silence wasn't quiet. It was attention, the kindness humans never give, the kind no commander, suitor, or friend ever showed her. Over time, she no longer felt alone. She braided her hair before each visit, smoothed her cloak, sat beside the swan for hours, shoulder to wing, speaking little but feeling more than she ever had in Sparta's palace or battlefield. And so far, the swan never ran off, never aged, never changed. She should have been scared. There are stories of gods turning into animals to lure humans to doom. Stories of punishments for those who love the divine. But Leonthe didn't believe in stories anymore. She believed in how her hand fit perfectly against the curve of the swan's neck, in how it bowed when she sang softly into the night, how it seemed to wait for her, need her. No words, no promises, but in their silence, something ancient took root, and though she never spoke it aloud, not even to herself, Leonthe knew what it was: love. The swan was not born of earth. Its wings once stretched across the sky. Its fingers once played the lyre that made the sun rise. Its name whispered in temples, carved in marble, shouted in songs. Apollo, god of light, music, prophecy. Now silent, feathered, susbound. Long before Leonthe was born, Apollo had sinned before Olympus. He challenged Zeus, not with swords or rebellion, but with truth. He spoke out against his father's punishments, against cruelty flowing from throne to world, against the silence power demanded. So Zeus didn't kill him, he destroyed him, a curse cast in fury, more cruel than justice. Apollo was stripped of form, voice, divinity, forced into the body of a swan, not to teach humility, but to remind him that he could shine like the sun and still be trapped in darkness. The curse was even harsher. There was a condition. If a mortal discovered his true identity, the transformation would become permanent. And so Apollo, she had waited for years, centuries, lifetimes, drifting on the lake, hiding under the stars, watching humanity forget its own temple, forget its hymns, watching the world grow colder as the gods slipped away until Leonte showed up, and her presence cracked something inside him, something buried so deep even Olympus forgot it existed. Hope he never wanted to be seen, never wanted to stay, but she kept coming back, and her voice, the way she spoke to him in the empty field, was the only thing that reignited the fire inside him. She wasn't a nun, not a fairy, definitely not some chosen prophet. She was a warrior with hands made for weapons, a woman hardened by loss and trained not to feel anything at all. But she still saw him, treated him not like a symbol or a threat, but like something sacred, something worth waiting for. He didn't dare speak, didn't dare reveal his name, but with a tilt of his head and the quiet of his body, he answered every question she never asked, and slowly, unbelievably, he loved her back. Sparta. Solitude was respected, but not for too long. Leonte's absence didn't go unnoticed. Every full moon, she slipped away from the camp, from the training grounds, from the commanders and the family. At first, nobody asked her about it. She was Leonte untouchable, unshakable, a warrior whose loyalty was etched into every scar. But Sparta thrived on order, discipline, and love, especially secret love, which was a foreign concept in a city built on control. The whispers started. She wanders. She's quiet in council. She trains, but her strikes lack their usual bite. Yep. Leonte changed. Her moves were still sharp, but no longer ruthless. Her voice lost its rasp, and something softened in her eyes. Some nights, she smiled to herself like she held a secret even the gods couldn't steal. Her father noticed first, Commander Adristos, a man with a face carved from stone, whose daughter was supposed to lead men, not chase feelings. He called her in one night, supposedly for strategy, but when the room was empty, he said plainly, "What's keeping you awake?" Leonte said nothing. His voice dropped. "Don't forget who you are." But she already had at least the version Sparta had made of her, what the city built in stone, the swan touched with water, and Leonte found she didn't want to go back to the old self. Still, Sparta watched. Once, a patrol followed her outside the walls, tracking her footprints toward the cliffs. They lost her near the olive groves. She was too good to be followed, but that was enough to breed suspicion. The priests whispered omens, that the moon carried voices, that lakes beyond Sparta stirred. Strangely, a female warrior disappearing every full moon. They feared madness, or worse, a god. Leonte knew the walls were closing in, that eyes were learning to look where they once looked away. Her silence, once her strength, made her weak now, but she kept going, kept finding him, and in the forest where moonlight touched feathers, she forgot Sparta's noise, forgot the rules, forgot the danger. Only one thing mattered now, not getting caught, because if the world found out what she held inside, both of them would be destroyed. That night, the moon hung heavy, low, full, glowing gold like a dying flame. Leonte stood in her room, fingers trembling on her armor, unable to fasten the last clasp. Something had changed. She'd felt it for days, a quiet tremble under her feet, like the ground knew something she didn't. The swan looked different than before, restless, alert. its feathers bristling when the wind shifted. Last time, it was restless, alert, feathers standing on end when the wind changed. It circled her twice before. Last time they met, it was more restless, more alert, feathers sticking up as the wind shifted. It circled her twice before, landing beside her, its warmth sharp, not gentle. That night, she couldn't sleep. When she finally did, she saw visions. She stood in a grove of silver trees, hands covered in golden dust. A statue appeared, half man, half swan, rigid wings, a serene yet soulless face. She reached out, calling, a name she didn't know. She knew Apollo. The statue cracked, and a voice echoed not from the heavens, but from the next day. Leonthe left Sparta earlier than usual, her chest pain growing worse with every step. She didn't take her usual path. Her feet led her deeper into hills she'd never crossed before, through trees unfamiliar, into bushes with no memory. There, beneath spring leaves and moss, she found an ancient altar, cracked and weathered, engraved with a single unmistakable word. In peeling old gold, Apollon. Her breath hitched. Suddenly, everything clicked. The warmth of the swan, its listening eyes, the dreams, the curse deep in her bones. Why, it always came at the full moon. He wasn't just enchanted, he was a god. Oh Lord, she'd broken something. She staggered back as feathers fell behind her. The swan followed her, silent as ever, but its stillness no longer comforted her. It was watching sadly, gently, like it already knew, like the truth had arrived. And so did the end. The forest lost its silence. The air vibrated slow and deep, like the breath of something ancient waking up. Moonlight shimmered on the lake's surface. Trees bowed, witnesses to a secret that had lived through centuries. Leonthe stood frozen before the altar. The name Apollo echoed in her mind like a spear striking stone. She turned slowly, as if moving faster might erase the truth, but it was too late. The swan was still there. No gliding, no grace, just standing and watching. Its feathers no longer gleamed, the light fading, flickering like a flame about to die. Leonthe stepped closer, lips parted, unsure what to say, if anything at all. "I know," she whispered. The wind calmed. A feather drifted from the swan's back, falling slowly, silent, before vanishing into dust the moment it touched the altar. And then the change began. The swan's neck curved not with grace, but with pain. Its body shuddered. Feathers burst into streams of gold and light, wings bending into arms, webbed feet splitting into toes digging into the earth where the swan once stood. Now knelt a man, naked, radiant, shattered Apollo. His hair sparkled like dawn's sky. His skin glowed faintly, like embers on marble. But his eyes were dimmed by sadness, by the inevitable. Leonthe stepped back, hand to mouth. She had loved him in silence, and now that silence was unbearable, he tried to speak. But the curse wasn't fully gone. His voice cracked like thunder in a storm so old no one could name it. "Finally," he said, almost like a breeze, "you're not allowed to know. That was the only rule." She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her warrior's face like rivers carving mountain stone. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. Then he smiled once the smile of a god, not joy, but farewell. "I know." And with that, The ground beneath them trembled, a silent earthquake, a divine sentence passed without mercy. His light faded, and he stiffened, limbs frozen. Apollo turned to stone, and Leonthe could only watch her love become legend. The moment the name was spoken, the curse kicked in. Apollo's once godly soft body hardened, inch by inch. The light beneath his skin dimmed like silence before vanishing into dust the moment it touched the altar. And then the change began. The swan's neck curved not gracefully, but in pain. Its body trembled. Feathers burst into golden streams, and light. Wings bending into arms, webbed feet splitting into toes digging into the earth where the swan had stood. Now kneeling, a naked man, radiant and broken, Apollo. His hair sparkled like the dawn sky. His skin glowed faintly, like ember under marble, but his eyes dimmed with sorrow, with inevitability. Leonthe stepped back, hand to her mouth. She had loved him silently, and now that silence was unbearable. He tried to speak, but the curse wasn't fully gone. His voice cracked like thunder in an ancient storm with no name. Finally, he whispered, almost like the wind, "You must not know. That was the only rule." She knelt beside him, tears streaming down her warrior's face like rivers carving through stone. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. He smiled once then, a god's smile, not happy, but goodbye, I know. And with that, the ground beneath them trembled, a silent earthquake, a divine sentence passed without mercy. His light faded. He stiffened, so limbs frozen. Apollo turned to stone, and Leonthe could only watch her love become legend. As soon as the name was spoken, the curse took hold. Apollo's once soft, godly flesh hardened inch by inch. The light beneath his skin dimmed like cold metal. His golden hair lost its shine, stiffening into marble strands as Zeus's final punishment began. No mercy, no pardon. Leonthe gripped his hand, still warm, still trembling, but she could feel the stone spreading like frost over flesh. His fingers squeezed hers one last time before going completely still. She shook her head. No, no, it can't end like this. But the curse didn't listen. It had waited centuries in silence, patient and cruel. Apollo's chest heaved once more, then fell silent. The half-curved wings behind turned to stone. The final song behind his shoulders froze stiff in place. His knees buckled from grief, then locked solid. His face stayed beautiful, still kind, but caught somewhere between love and pain. His eyes were open, but saw nothing. And then came silence. A silence deeper than any battlefield, deeper than the moment before a charge. This wasn't the calm of peace, but the hush of loss, of something sacred breaking apart. Leonthe knelt there, forehead pressed to his cold, stone-cold hand. A hand that once cradled stars was now just rock. Her tears slid down, his marble fingers dripping onto the ground, one slow, steady drop at a time like a funeral march. The forest faded away. Even the moon, usually bright and watchful, seemed hidden behind clouds. No lightning, no. Gods showed up because the punishment was done. Zeus had spoken. The swan had flown its last flight, and Apollo, the god of light, was now just a silent statue, forever frozen in that final moment of truth. Leonthe stayed long after. The transformation ended, holding tightly what was left. She didn't scream. She didn't curse the heavens. No Spartans heard her cries. No warriors witnessed it. Only the wind, the trees, and the stone statue of a god who once loved her, not with thunder and fire, but with quiet stillness. And now, Leonthe was silent, never returning to Sparta. She left her armor by the altar, drew her sword, letting her fierce reputation dissolve like smoke over a lake. The woman who once stood tall among kings now knelt quietly next to a statue that would never move again. The forest became her world. Every full moon, she returned, never missing a single one. No offerings, no incense, no prayers, just herself and a memory. She sat beside the statue of Apollo, her fingers tracing the cold stone hand she once held. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she hummed a song he'd never heard, but somehow felt like it belonged to both of them. Other times, she just stared at the water, silent. The villagers started whispering. They said a woman haunted the hills, wandering under the moonlight with eyes like distant stars. Some claimed she'd gone mad. Others said she was chosen. But no one dared bother her. Years passed. Winters came and went. Empires changed. The gods stayed silent. But Leonthe remained, older, but never weak. Her strength was stubborn, not soldier-like, but like the roots of an olive tree, holding tight to the same patch of earth year after year, storm after storm, and the statue stood firm. Apollo stood in the middle, wings curved behind him, eyes fixed on the spot where Leonthe often sat. That moment, frozen in marble, stone, untouched by time. Some visitors swear the stone feels warm to the touch, that if you place your hand on his chest, you can feel something faint, like a heartbeat in a dream. And then, on the last full moon, Leonthe came. She sat beside him longer than usual, gently rested her head on his shoulder, and never moved. Again, when the villagers came weeks later, they found her there, peaceful, eyes closed, lips curved into a smile. Next to her, Apollo's statue glowed softly, as if lit from within. No one touched it. They didn't build temples or shrines, but the legend grew. And now, when the full moon rises and the wind is still, some say the swan will return. The lake, not to watch, but to remember. Melanion wasn't born in a palace or amidst temple incense. The boy was born beneath a willow tree during a storm that tore the sky in two. His mother, a midwife's daughter, wrapped him in linen as thunder rumbled over the hills. Birds scattered, rain danced, but the baby didn't cry. He hummed from the moment he could walk. Music followed him. The stream whispered melodies as he knelt to drink. Leaves rustled to his rhythm as he passed. He didn't need directions. The sounds belonged to him, about him. By age 10, the kid could mimic any bird call and turn it into a song. By 16, he played the role of a charming lyre so well that even battle-hardened warriors stopped to listen. He sang about rivers, lost brothers, pre-war fields songs that made eyes fill with tears they didn't even know they had. People called him a gift, a miracle, a child of divine breath. He never claimed any of it. Melanian wandered village to village, sharing his music with no need for cash or ego. His voice could cool fevers. His strings softened hardened hearts. He once played for a dying child who smiled at his lullaby and slipped away as if into a dream. But not everyone who listened was mortal. One spring evening, sitting by a shimmering river, strumming a melody about starlight, the atmosphere suddenly shifted, the wind slowed, the water stilled, even the frogs shut up, and then they arrived the muses, 9 of them, stepping gently from behind the veil of the world, wrapped in light and sound, each carrying their own essence history, tragedy, dance, epic poetry, and more. Their eyes weren't kind or cruel, just deeply understanding. They listened, and then, to Millennian's surprise, they sang back. 9 voices, perfectly in harmony, older than language itself. Melanian closed his eyes and without hesitation joined in with those eyes. His voice wasn't theirs, it evolved them. When the last note faded into silence, even the stars seemed closer. One muse, Kali, the oldest and sternest, touched her forehead. "You're no ordinary man," she said. "You're a vessel." And so began the legend of Melanian, a poet whose voice shook the very heavens. From that night on, Melanian was no longer just a talented mortal. People touched him, noticed him, whispered about him. The muses had chosen him in the quiet folds of Mount Hell, where few dared to tread. They invited him into their sacred circle, there, beneath ancient trees and an unspoiled sky. Melanian learned not from lectures, but from experience. Kali, the muse of epics, taught him how to turn stories into sound. Cleo whispered to him about the history of nations. As he slept, Terpsora danced barefoot over leaves while he played beside her, his fingers learning the rhythm of wind and body. Ute placed her flute in his palm and simply said, "Listen." And he did. He absorbed not just melodies, but truths, the kind that live between words, the kind mortals rarely notice but deeply feel, in the silence before the storm, in the ache of longing, in a child's gasp at first snowfall. The muses gave him not only power, but vision, and they only asked for one thing in return: sing for them. By that, they meant mortals, the lost, the weary, the proud and broken, those who needed to remember that beauty still lives even in pain. That song could be both a soothing balm and a razor blade. At first, Melanian obeyed. He performed in city squares and quiet fields, playing for kings and beggars alike. His songs healed broken hearts, sparked revolutions, mended father-child bonds, and forged peace from hard grudges. But as his talent grew, so did something else: ambition. He started chasing sounds that the muses never taught, notes no god had touched. In the quietest nights, he often wrote alone, sketching verses beyond language, a song that could bend time, still the wind, and turn tears to ice. The final song he told no one, not even the muses, because part of him no longer wanted to share the sacred anymore. He wanted to surpass it, and the muses, always watchful, noticed the change not in his fingers, but in his eyes. How he didn't tell anyone, not even the muses, because some part of him no longer wanted to share the sacred. He wanted to move beyond it, and the muses, always watchful, noticed the change not in his fingers, but in his eyes, the way he looked beyond them, as if fate owed him more than admiration, and far away, fate stirred slightly, because no mortal can walk beside gods forever without paying a price. Melanion withdrew from this world. He left behind applause, petitions, gifts from kings, and the devotion of cities. He stopped performing for the public, stopped teaching, even stopped talking to the muses. Some thought he was ill, others claimed he had died, but nope. He just hiked up to the shady slopes of Mount Helicon, deeper than any mortal dared go, where only echoes of ancient gods dared to linger. There, in a cave lined with crystals that sang when light hit them, he began composing his final song. It came to him piece by piece, sometimes in sleep, sometimes in thunder. Sometimes the silence was so deep it scared the hell out of him. He didn't write it down. He saw it more like a secret tucked inside the folds of reality. The melody wouldn't stop. It shifted with his breath, twisted with his heartbeat. This wasn't a tune for a concert. It was truth in sound. He heard the birth of stars right from the first note, felt empires crumble to dust. It wasn't sad. It wasn't happy. It just was. He worked on it for months, maybe years. Time bent weirdly inside that cave. He ate barely anything, slept only when the music allowed. He could cry one moment, laugh the next, like the song was echoing inside his soul, not just his hands. And when it was done, the world had changed. Birds stopped mid-flight. Trees leaned toward the windless mountain. Streams went silent. The sky held its breath. Far away, in Olympus's marble halls, even the gods turned their heads. Even the fates, who never take their eyes off their weaving, paused. The fabric whispered, a trembling thread. Lysis frowned, and Atropos, the one with the scissors that never hesitated, set them down. They were listening. The song didn't demand worship. It didn't beg for love. It just revealed everything. As the last note faded, even the cave stopped echoing, like the world knew repeating it would be a crime. The gods waited. The muses waited. They hoped Melanion would return to share this miracle with the world, but he didn't. He hid it, and by doing so, he created a new kind of music, a music of silence and consequence. When Melanion stepped out of the cave, the world seemed smaller. The sky, once vast, now looked pale next to the echo of that song humming in his bones. People swarmed to greet him, musicians, poets, even priests. They begged to hear what he had written, to feel some power that shook the heavens. But Melanion said nothing. They asked again. He smiled, weakly. Not yet. Only the muses saw the change. They came to him one sunset, stepping out of starlight like the breath of a lyre. Their cloaks shimmered with inspiration, but their eyes held warnings. Erato said softly, sadly, "You were chosen to carry beauty." But Cleo added, "Beauty isn't meant to be buried. You have to sing that song," Calliope whispered. Melanion bowed his head. "I won't cheapen it." They flinched like he'd slapped them. "You think mortals don't deserve it?" Terpsy asked, voice trembling. "You think you're the only guardian." He looked into their eyes, not angry, but colder, possessive. Yeah. The silence between them was like winter. "Then you're no longer one of us," Calliope said. not because you made something beyond us, but because you hoard it. He said nothing, and they vanished. Still, the gods waited. Even Zeus, who rarely cares about human drama, stopped his lightning to listen. Even Hades tilted his head in the abyss. They waited for a note, a whisper, a sound. Nothing happened. Millennium kept that song locked inside, not written down, not recorded, not shared. He called it sacred, but sacred things, when sealed too long, start to sour. He performed. Other works, they were beautiful. The audience cried. The crowd cheered. But he knew, and the divine knew, something was missing. Even Hades tilted his head in his abyss to listen. They waited for a note, a whisper, a sound. Nothing happened. Millennium kept that song to himself, unwritten, unrecorded, unshared. He called it sacred. But sacred things, sealed too long, start to turn sour. He performed. Other works that were still beautiful. The audience cried. The crowd cheered. But he knew, and the divine knew, something was missing. Worse, something had been stolen. A song that could move fate, bend time, and touch the gods. It got buried deep under his pride. He told himself he'd protect it, but the muses, watching from afar, saw the truth. He'd chained the sacred into his ego, and the gods just put up with the madness, the wars, and the worship without a peep. Then one night, the wind died down, the stars went silent, and a curse began to unfold, not with fire, but with memory. The curse whispered softly, no thunder, no angry Olympus gods, just a dream. Millennium lay beneath the vast sky, soaking in the silence he once treasured. Gentle sleep pulled him into darkness. Waiting there was the song, the final song. It returned, clearer, richer, and impossibly perfect. He heard notes he'd never written, melodies he'd never dreamed up. It carried him through the stars, into oceans, unraveling the fabric of meaning. He wept with joy, awe, and surrender. Then the sorrow faded away. No fading, no erasing, no memory, no message, no name. The tune he wrote with his soul, felt in his bones, vanished like morning fog. At first, he thought it was a cruel joke of sleep. He grabbed the lyre and tried to recall even a single note. Nothing. He strummed frantically, off-key, mad, but got zero that night. He went to bed early, heart pounding, and the song blazed brighter than ever. He sang along in his dream, tears streaming, fingers dancing in the light. It felt amazing. He could remember it in dreams. But again, at dawn, Millennium lit candles all night and scribbled the notes in the dark. He begged his mind to hold on to a phrase, a rhythm, a single image, but no matter how hard he tried, it slipped away. Again and again, he stopped playing, refused to perform. Crowds thinned, friends left. His house grew dusty and cold. But who cared? Now he had an obsession, remember the song. The muses watched from afar, sad. Otterpay said he'd been gifted a treasure and chose to lock it away. Now only he could hear it, Polyhymnia said. And never remember again, Cleo whispered. It's not revenge, it's balance, Millennium would hear. This song every night forever, but it only lived in dreams. Every sunrise, It slipped through his cracked hands like water. He would never stop chasing it, never stop hoping, and over time, hope would turn crazy, because what torments a poet more than forgetting the greatest song he ever knew? And knowing it still sings without him, Millennians stopped counting nights. They blended into an endless loop of joy and loss. Every night, he sank into dreams where the final song held him like a lover returning from war, and every dawn he woke alone, screaming, crying his heart out. At first, he tried to break the curse. He hired scribes to sleep beside him, begged prophets to extract shards of memory from his mind. He sang in front of mirrors, hoping his voice would unlock some hidden memory. Nothing worked, and he began to tire. He stopped eating. His cloak hung loose on a hollow frame. His fingers trembled as he reached for his lyre, his instrument he once cradled like a child. Strings snapped under his shaking hands. He didn't fix them. He didn't need them anymore, because in sleep, the music still played. It became his only purpose, the only place he felt whole, and waking up was punishment. He cursed the sun, smashed windows, locked himself in a room with no light. But the song lingered into morning. When he appeared, he no longer looked like a poet. Wild eyes, gaunt, voice once beautiful, now cracked after nights of desperate humming. He wandered from village to village like a beggar, not for money, but for memory. Have you heard it? He asked strangers. The song had no beginning and no end. Did you hear this in your dreams at first? People hated him, then feared him. Some threw stones, others ran away. He started singing random fragments in the streets, wild melodies, to others meaningless, and it never ended. Did you catch that in your sleep at first? People hated him, then they feared him. Some threw stones, others ran away. He started singing random, fragmented tunes on the street, wild melodies with no rhyme or reason to anyone else, meaningless noise, but to him, they were clues, keys, shards of a broken mirror he almost pieced back together until it always slipped through his fingers. He'd laugh at his failure, then cry, then laugh again, and every night, the song came back, sparkling, whole, just out of reach. The muses watched, not angry, but with pity. He used to be their finest ship. Now he was like a cracked vase, leaking only when no one was listening, and as he sank, the song he hoarded became the thing that broke him. Not fire, not rage, just silence. Millennian was no longer living in this world. His body moved through it, sure, but his mind was elsewhere, stuck between dreams and daylight, past and present. A song only he could hear, and only when it was too late to hold on. Keys walked barefoot through cities that once welcomed him like royalty. Kids who sat at his feet now ran away from his shadow. His name, once praised, was now a warning: don't end up like Millennian. He slept wherever he could, under trees, in abandoned chapels, sometimes at the doorsteps of houses whose caretakers once begged for his presence. He no longer wanted to eat. He just wanted a place to rest, just a dream. The curse never failed. Every night he fell asleep with trembling hope, and the song returned at last, whole and vivid, a perfect ghost, and every morning he forgot it again. The cruelty wasn't in the silence, it was in the memory of sound. He remembered hearing something divine, something of immense meaning, but he forgot why. He started talking to the darkness, to trees, to the stars. Sometimes he sang to strangers and begged them to sing it back, convinced the tune was hiding in someone else's throat. When he thought a kid hummed it passing by, he followed that family through 2 villages before collapsing, begging the child to sing it again. But that sound was something else, something ordinary. He cried for hours, and every night the song still played, mocking, cradling, sacred. He tried humming it while dreaming, tried waking up inside the melody, but the curse was clever. He couldn't move in the dream. He couldn't record it, write it down, carry it. He could only listen. And when he woke up, emptiness. Some who saw him said he'd still hum in his sleep, that if you pressed your ear near his mouth at midnight, you could hear music unlike any other, but only then, only in the dark. The muses stopped coming, the gods stopped watching, and Melanian, once the voice of the world, now wandered like the echo of a song the world forgot. And he couldn't forget either. Melanian grew thin as twilight, his skin, once kissed by golden light, now pallid and paper-thin. His voice, what was left, was the hoarse whisper of years spent wandering and whispering. He no longer sought food, shelter, or even the song. He just walked. One evening, he reached a cliff overlooking the sea. Quiet, no town, no roads, no curious eyes, just wind, waves, and stars slowly rising in a deep blue sky. He curled up against a rock, sea breeze tossing what was left of his hair. He didn't cry. He didn't sing. He just closed his eyes, and the dream came again. But this time, something was different. No delays, no fog to trudge through, no struggle to hear. The final song was there from the start, full and clear, but not just sound. It was a place, a presence, a world built from music. Melanian stood inside, barefoot on strings that bent like grass, stars blinking in rhythm above. The sky was a symphony. The wind sang along, the melody, and he didn't just hear it, he was part of it. His voice blended into the song, steady and unwavering. It never forgot. It soared. He saw every missed note. Every line made him ache. But now he understood. The song had never left him. It grew without him. Everything was beyond his hand's control. He wasn't the owner, just a witness. And in that final dream, no sadness, no shame, no punishment, just freedom. As the sun, still as a statue, Melanian didn't budge. A gentle breeze swirled around him like it was carrying his last breath. A shepherd passing by the cliff later found him, peaceful, hands crossed over his chest as if hugging an invisible lyre. No scroll, no recording, but above him, high over the coastal sky, seagulls flew in a weird formation, almost dancing to a tune only they could hear. And in that moment, the sea sang not with words, not with melody, but with something older than both, something Melanian finally became. Melanian was buried under a lonely olive tree near the cliff where he took his last nap. No priest, no ceremony, no crowd either. Just the shepherd who found him and a few villagers who still remembered the tale. The faint echo of a poet who once made gods hold their breath. No statues, just silence. But silence, oddly enough, has a way of amplifying the truth. Over the years, strange rumors spread far and wide. Visitors claim if you pass that cliff on a new moon night, you might catch a melody in the wind, fleeting, brief, but heartbreakingly beautiful. Not a full song, just a single note enough to make you stop dead in your tracks. Kids started dreaming of tunes they'd never heard. Musicians woke up at night with tears on their cheeks, clueless why. And sometimes, when a poet sat alone at sunset, no audience in sight, a sudden chord would form under their fingers. Something not theirs, something perfect. They never remembered it with sorrow. Astrologers said nothing. They didn't curse any other poet. They didn't demand the song back because they understood what Melanian had become. Not a warning, not a hero, more like a ship turned legend, a soul punished not by cruelty, but by refusal, saved not by sharing, but by surrender. The final song was never written. That play never performed in any arena or temple. It doesn't exist in scrolls or holy books, but it lives in the quiet moments between sleep and wakefulness, in the silence before the first chord is strummed. Like how the sea sounds different when you're grieving, Melanian's song became part of the world, not to remember, but to feel, a whisper in the bones, a wordless melody, and anyone who feels it, even just once, will never forget the silence that follows. They say if you stand alone on the right cliff at just the right night, unseen by any soul, with the wind softly blowing, you might hear a sound not of this world, just a fragment, just a breath. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you'll finally understand why Melanian never gave up on it. They say if you stand alone on the right cliff at just the right night, unseen by any soul, with the wind softly blowing, you might hear a sound not of this world, just a fragment, just a breath. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you'll finally understand why Melanian never gave up on it.